So this is something I wanted to talk about for a while, and before I get to it, if you're new here, my logs are not scripted. I'm just sitting here talking. As usual, I have my notes here. Let me actually click over because I'm like covering my notes. And I've got my seltz. This time I have Canada Dry's Pomegranate Cherry Sparkling Seltzer Water. And as a little update about my last log where I was curating my Twitter content, I actually went back into it recently and kind of added more stuff to it and made a lot of the things that I had muted temporarily permanent mutes because the experience was just so positive on Twitter after going through and just getting rid of things and saying I don't want to see discussions of these terms, etc., that now I'm kind of hooked on it. I like the fact that I can go on Twitter now and see information that is important to me, but not see things that raise my blood pressure. So that's good. If you haven't watched that, maybe go watch that if you're somebody who uses Twitter, because again, maybe you will want to use my steps to curate your own content. But who cares? This is not about that. This is about something that has been kind of in the news recently, or at least in the news in terms of, the internet world. And I will say this, I recorded a log at one point that I think was called Who is Tench Roast or something like that, where I talked about the origins of my username and what my persona online used to be, and how a lot of it revolved around social commentary, and how I did not want to bring that to my space now, and how difficult that's been to kind of keep my nose out of the social commentary business, I guess. So I try to limit myself to what is that I'm seeing floating? Is that a balloon? Now I'm distracted. Hey bird that's flying above it, why don't you go down and poke it and then I'll know. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, so I've been trying to limit anything that I do talk about in my Lite logs to stuff that could potentially be seen as relevant given that, I'm on the internet. So talking about social media, talking about gaming, talking about, YouTube, etc., things like that, as well as talking about myself. I feel like I'm not crossing the line too much into the social commentary I really don't want to get into, while still satiating that need I have to say shit. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this back when it first became an issue on Twitch with these hot tub streamers. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I don't really use Twitch as much as I should. That's a whole ecosystem that I haven't dived into. It's not because I don't think it's worth it. It's because I don't have time. But I do still kind of like to know what the hell's going on there. And so I just, from the side of my brain, was aware that there was this debate going on about female streamers who people felt were basically kind of towing the line of, the terms of service to have these streams where they're in bikinis and they're in these little hot tubs inside their house or wherever, and they're doing things. But the point of the stream wasn't whatever, activity they were engaging in or whatever subject they were talking about. It was more so about using their bodies for attention, and how there were a lot of people who complained about that, saying, listen, you're kind of taking away from what this platform is supposed to be, especially for other female streamers. Like, you're making it so that there's this other kind of standard that they're fighting against, that if you're a female streamer who just wants to sit there and play games or sit there and do whatever it is you're doing and have people watch you because of your content, that you may be adversely affected by the popularity of and the audience of these other women who are just using their bodies for attention, and what kind of message that sends on the platform, what kind of people that could potentially attract to the platform, etc., 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 etc. Whatever. If you're interested in finding out more about it, I know that there are articles about it. People have talked about it. I don't really want to talk about that. It's just what made me want to talk about this other thing in general. And I didn't because whatever, I just kind of forgot that I wanted to talk about it. And then more stuff happened regarding Twitch where now it's more about like ASMR. So now I'm going to talk about it. I have time. I have seltz. Let's do this. Now, I said once, maybe in that same log, Who is Tense Frost, but I'm not sure, but talking about my political leanings and my beliefs and just the way I express myself, I usually get in trouble with people who identify as being on the right or the left, even though I personally lean very, very left. And I'm driven just as much by intellectualizing things and finding a rationale for things as I am by more emotional things like empathy and, trying to understand a person's perspective and trying to accept kind of the experience that they're dealing with. And so I feel like I always got in trouble with both ends of that spectrum because people who lean more right tend to push the emotional stuff aside a lot more. Not so much when it comes to themselves, mind you, but when it comes to how other people feel, people that they don't agree with, people that they don't relate to or identify with. Whereas there are many people on the left who I feel push the kind of intellectual side back a little bit too much in favor of saying, well, I'm going to think, say, or do whatever makes you feel the way that I want to make you feel, and not really question it kind of in an academic way as much as I should, because I don't want to offend or I don't want to, invalidate somebody's experience or somebody's perspective, etc. So with me being sort of in the middle with the way that I process things, even though after processing those things, I end up falling more often than not way towards the left than maybe kind of in the middle at most. I can't really think of anything right now where I think I lean right, but it still gets me in trouble, is the point. So I say all of that to say this. Throughout the course of my logs, I will likely say things that will make you not like me, and that is 105% okay with me. You have the right to feel how you feel. Whether I think your position is a smart one that I just don't feel the same about, or a dumb one, you can have it. But remember that this is Frostland, not you land. So whatever opinion you have does not take precedence here. I sometimes feel like we start to lose sight as a, culture, as a species, as a society, of why we have certain principles in the first place. Whether it's rights, for example, like why did we feel like we needed to have certain rights? Why do we feel like we need to have certain freedoms? Or things that, are more intimate and more personal to us, like social issues. And this is a subject where I feel like we've kind of fallen into a little bit of that trap. And I'm saying this from my perspective. I am a lady, as I've said millions of times, but I'm not speaking for all women. I'm speaking for me women, which is self. I'm speaking for self and me and I, okay? And me and I feels this way, and this is how I've always felt. I've taken an issue with women more often than not, and certainly more frequently than men, being reduced to our bodies. And that being the source of our social value, what our bodies look like, whether or not we are sexually attractive. And I'm going to make a lot of generalizations here because generalizations are all we can make. Literally nothing that anyone says applies to everyone. There will always be exceptions. So I've always been annoyed by that, but I've also always felt that it wasn't something that I thought we would ever actually overcome. It's not something I think will ever cease to be a problem. It is just something that I think at best we can hope to regulate. Meaning that I don't personally believe we are ever going to achieve a point in our society or, in human society at large across the globe where women are viewed the same as men in terms of our bodies meaning the same things that theirs do. I just don't see that happening unless something very crazy happens that would not be in keeping with kind of the natural development of a society. And I don't say that to be a pessimist. I say that to be more of a realist. We are thousands upon thousands of years into this and it's the same. So I just don't feel like we're going to overturn that global history of our species and of our kind of gender dynamics overnight. I don't even think we're going to do it maybe in my lifetime or, like I said, at all. The best I think we can do is take this discrepancy into account and, try to govern our societies in ways that will equalize things for women as much as we can, even if we can't equalize the way women are seen in people's minds. While it's something that angers me, I very much subscribe to that, that mantra, whatever it is, to know you can change what let me look it up. But it's this saying that's like, God grant me, and by the way, I'm agnostic, so I don't take it as actual God, can you do this for me? It's just a philosophy that I agree with. where it says to grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. To me, this perception of the female form in our society and how it's valued as compared to the male form is something that I cannot change. Whether you agree with me or not, that's not the point. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be a lot of people yelling about it. Of course there are. But what we yell about and complain about, that doesn't mean we've actually changed anything. It means that, we've changed the discourse surrounding it. Yes, it means that we're pushing that forward, but it doesn't mean that we're actually changing the reality of it in terms of human nature. So while I will point things out and while I will complain about certain things, I also don't do it to the extent where I actually, in my mind, think I'm making a difference. I know when I'm not, and I can accept that I'm not, because you will drive yourself crazy if you cannot be at peace with the fact that you can't exert yourself and impose yourself and your values and your wisdom on everyone in a way that actually changes them, in a way that changes their mind or changes their behavior. So I'm not saying it's foolish to try. I just think it's foolish to try so hard. You are constantly in this state of internal chaos because things don't work out the way you want them to. Because you're shouting this thing from the rooftops and there are still people who are like, whatever. Reality is a thing you can interact with. It is not a thing you can dictate. And unfortunately, me having that perspective also means that I just don't get as angry about certain things as other people do, which often makes them think I don't care about it as much as they do. And I feel like this is one of those subjects where if I don't scream my head off every time a man reduces a woman to her sex or her body, if I'm not just raging at it, then there are people who think I just don't give a shit. I don't care about, feminism. I don't care about women's rights. I don't care about, respecting women, blah, 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 blah. It's not true, but who gives a shit? People think things that aren't true about me all the time. That is also a thing I have the serenity to know I cannot change. So how is any of this relevant to what I want to talk about? And for the record, this is why I have notes and why it would be better if I actually scripted these logs, because I'm just going to go off on these rambling whatevers. I can sit here and say that I don't like this thing, right? I don't like the way that women are constantly sexualized. And that's just how I'm going to express it, so I don't have to keep switching up what I'm saying. I'm just calling everything that I'm talking about sexualizing women. Let's just simplify this. I can say that I don't like it, but that's not important. To me, what's important is why. Why do I take an issue with the fact that women are seen in this way? And the obvious answer for me is that we're not just bodies. We're not just titties. We're not just ass. We're not just holes for you to imagine sticking a dick in. We're not just here for your aesthetic pleasure. We're people. And we have the right to have all of the little facets of what that means for us, what that means to be a person, and to have interests and personalities and skills and talents and a mind. We have the right to have all of that exist independently and be valued independent of our bodies. And again, it does not mean that there aren't these same kind of standards for men, but there's a difference in how men and women are valued in terms of how close you are to that standard. I feel that more often than not, men can be very far from what might be considered the ideal male form in your respective culture, your respective region, and still have people find value in knowing them and engaging them for all of the other things that make up who they are. Whereas with women, quite often, if you don't meet this beauty standard, you might as well not exist, because society doesn't see much value in you beyond that. Oh, it's great that you're talented, or it's great that you're smart, or it's great that you're XYZ, but are you hot? No. So I'd rather check out this guy who has all those same traits that you have, because you're not providing for me the thing that you as a woman should provide, which is aesthetic pleasure. If you're not going to provide me with that, then why do I need to pay attention to you at all, right? It's just a very different dynamic and a very different value scale that I think women and men are subjected to. So that's why I don't like that women are hypersexualized, and why I don't like that we are so often reduced to our appearance. Now, here's where I feel like I start to dissent from what I think some of the discourse has been these days. I feel like we've gone from saying hypersexualizing women and women's bodies is bad into this more gender-specific version of that core tenet, where it's not that sexualizing women is bad, it's that men sexualizing women is bad. It's fine if women do it to each other or to themselves. That's where I part ways with a lot of the people who are talking about these issues, because the end result is the same. Women being valued more for what you see than what they are. And that's an idea that's not really unique to this. I think that often marginalized groups, groups that could be considered minorities, groups that are treated like second-class citizens, often they'll regard removing the power from their oppressors by kind of appropriating their oppression. There being this blurred line between empowerment and internalization. For me, female empowerment is not all the things that we used to do because of men, or that men used to make us do. Let's just do it for ourselves. That to me is not the definition of female empowerment. To me, it is not the opposite of men doing things. To me, female empowerment is acting upon your own sense of self and kind of putting that out into the world in the way that is meaningful to you and that has the impact that you want it to have and that will represent you in the way that you want to be represented. Like doing what you fucking want for you, but in all ways. That to me is empowerment in general. And when you talk about female empowerment, I've always kind of taken issue with the fact that it's framed around our bodies. It's always framed around being, a way to push back against men and a way to push back against the patriarchy, as opposed to a way for a human being to reclaim themselves. And because of that, instead of there actually being this kind of independent thought, it's more like a wave of women all doing the same thing that they've always done, but saying it's empowerment now because they're saying that they're doing it for themselves. Meaning it's not seen as female empowerment when a woman, runs a business. That's more seen as like, ooh, girl power. You know what I mean? Like, you go girl boss. It's seen more like that. But female empowerment always revolves around your body and sex. And the reason I say that it blurs the line of you actually taking power away versus you just internalizing that power and now imposing that same standard upon yourself is because it isn't as inclusive as it should be. A woman who wants to show her body is seen as more empowered than a woman who doesn't. A woman who wants to, have sex on camera or, open an OnlyFans or something like that is seen as empowered. Whereas a woman who isn't interested in any of that stuff because maybe she considers her body to be a private thing, her making the decision to not sexualize herself, to not use her body for attention, to not use her looks, is never seen as empowerment. And I take issue with that. The fact that female empowerment as an idea is rooted so deeply in whether we want to show our bodies or not, whether we want to fuck somebody or not, and how openly we want to do it. So I'm already coming from, a completely different perspective on this issue, where I don't just accept on its face that it's okay for women to use their bodies to do things just because they're women, because that's empowering. That shouldn't be the way we define female empowerment in the first place. And I get that people use the ways in which they've been controlled as a jumping off point for how they want to get away from that control and how they want to take back that control. But it should just be a jumping off point. It should never be where, the conversation begins and ends. And the conversation for me about female empowerment should not begin and end with, do you get naked or not? If this doesn't make sense, what I'm saying to you, because it might not, I'll give you an example of how this perspective plays out in my mind. Years and years and years ago, I used to watch those like makeover shows. And there was this one on TLC, I think it was, which I don't remember what it was called. I think it was called What Not to Wear. One thing that used to drive me nuts is that whenever it was a woman and her style was that she was covered up, like she wore a lot of baggy things, there was always this kind of narrative around it from that host and from the people around them that the only reason you could possibly be wearing clothing like this is because you're insecure about your body. And you don't want to show your body. So let's find things that show your body and show your shape, and that will make you feel sexy. And I don't recall anyone ever saying to a man, the reason that you like baggy clothes is because you're afraid to show your body. And by virtue of you being a man, you should want to show your body. You should want to show your shape, and your sexiness is determined by showing your body. That's a distinctly female thing, imposed upon women that is not imposed upon men. This default belief that women should show their bodies, that our bodies are a thing to be seen. Therefore, our control and our power and our confidence and our security and our sexiness is all going to be rooted in whether we show it or not and how much and to who. For a woman, sexy is that something lays on your body a certain way. I've been susceptible to that, and I think a lot of people out there, whether they want to admit it or not, are susceptible to that. And that is a standard that men are not held to in the same way. But at least I recognize that. I recognize that if I want to show a little something and I perceive that as being sexier than, if I have it covered, I know where that came from. And I don't lie to myself and say that it didn't come from the same place just because I'm a woman having that thought. And then in other ways, I'm not susceptible to that, and that I can put on, sweatpants, and I can put on baggy shit, and I don't perceive that as me being less sexy. But the point is that I recognize these negative influences rather than acting like these negative perceptions of women and these negative ideas about womanhood and sexiness and femininity are magically not negative and magically not toxic because it's a woman who's saying it and it's a woman who's presenting herself that way. I just don't agree with that. So when I first started to hear people complaining about hot tub streamers and blah, 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 in spite of having my own kind of baseline perspective on things, that doesn't mean I have an automatic opinion on things that happen. That's not the way my brain works. I'm neutral on most things until you present it to me. And then I look at, the arguments that people are making on either side of it. And then I kind of react to those arguments. So I just thought, oh, what's happening? What's the big deal? And I found out, what I said, that it was people complaining because there were these girls who were getting all kinds of views, and other people feeling like they were stealing views, quote unquote, by doing what they felt was just not what the platform is for. Now, on its face, my first opinion is that, yeah, that's not what that platform is for. But that doesn't mean I care necessarily. It just means I agree. Something can be a space for certain things, and then somebody can come along and sort of change the nature of it and change the culture of it for better or worse. We have seen lots of platforms that started in one way that ended up kind of taking a shift because things started happening on it or started being posted on it that weren't what was originally intended. And then because of that, the audience of that platform changed, the reasons that people were going to that platform changed, and then policies had to be changed. And, bing, bang, boom, now the platform is kind of dead for the people who were originally on it. So it's not like it isn't possible for that other thing to detract from everything else and to change the perception of the platform. I'm not saying that's what's happening here, nor again am I saying I actually give a shit. But what I do want to push back against is just the notion that anyone who thinks it could potentially have an adverse effect on other streamers, that you're anti-woman, or that it's just about wanting to control women's bodies yet again. I just think that's an unfair and kind of disingenuous take on why people might not have wanted hot tub streamers on there. In theory, I would lean towards saying that's not what the platform is for. But in practice, in terms of how much I give a shit about a thing, I would not actually give a shit about it for that reason. I would, however, give a shit about it for that other reason, which is the sexualizing of women. And me feeling like you can't have any platform or, any area of entertainment or hobby or whatever it is where there isn't somebody that says, I know women's bodies sell, so let's find a way to get TNA in the mix. I would love to see a world in which that doesn't happen. But again, the serenity to accept the things you cannot change. That is not going to happen. Sex sells, bodies sell, especially if they're ladies' bodies. So for anybody who thinks you're gonna have a platform, especially that's monetized, and you think that women are not going to make use of the fact that we are constantly sexualized and that we are constantly reduced to and valued for our bodies, and that a significant portion of the human population just wants to look at us, of course people are going to do that. Of course, any platform where even if it's not monetized, but there's a popularity system and a ranking system, of course, women are going to use that to their advantage. People are going to do the thing they're comfortable doing that's going to bring them the most success. And that's just the way it is. And if you are a woman who, because you have a brain and therefore know if you look good enough and you have enough of the parts that people want to gawk at, you can make a living off of that, and you are comfortable doing that, you will do it. My point is that I don't see that as being higher minded or any better than a man using a woman's body to his advantage. That's not going to change, but it does sadden me sometimes because I feel like it just continues to feed into women being seen and used and most valued as bodies. And it all goes back to what I said in the beginning, remembering why we were so angry at men for sexualizing women. Was it simply because they're men? Or was it because we want to discourage a culture in which women are seen as parts? If it's the former, then fine. I get why everybody would be like, it's good that women are doing it. Who cares? Like, it's your body. It's bad if I, as a man, were to take advantage of it, but it's great that you, as a woman, take advantage of it. Then I would understand that if that was your initial reasoning for caring about the sexualizing of women at all. But if you're like me, where you care about it just on principle, that you don't give a shit who's doing it, the point is we're more than our titties. Can we act like it? We're more than asses. Can we act like it? We're more than our looks. Can we act like it? And when I say act like it, what I mean is not using your bodies to like bolster the other things. And I'll give you an example of that. Many years ago, there was somebody who'd come to me about, including me in a book or something where they were featuring female authors. And they were like, oh, it's about showing like the talent that women have and blah, blah, blah. But then they got to this point where they were like, and, the twist is like, we're also going to have a picture of you in a bikini. And I was like, why? And they were like, it's because I want to show women can be like creative and talented and smart and stuff and also be like sexy and attractive. And I declined to be a part of it because for me, that's not the point that we need to be making. The point we need to be making is that a woman can be smart and talented, etc., and it doesn't fucking matter if she's sexy. That's what we should be pushing. Not saying, hey, I know you don't really care that this woman's a great writer, but guess what? She's also hot. So, that's a thing that can be a thing. That's the antithesis of my personal values. And it spoke back to all of the times I or somebody else, like we'd be in a conversation and we'd be referencing a woman who was like a director, a writer, or whatever she was. And some dude that we're talking to, like eventually would get around to asking how she looks. That should not be relevant. And so to me, whatever this person thought they were doing with this book, I feel like they were encouraging the opposite. So when I say act like you are more than just your bodies, I mean not using your body as any component of what you do just because you're a woman. And that's not a rule I'm saying like you should follow. I'm saying I wish I lived in a world where more women who, set their body and their looks aside and made it as irrelevant as it should be were seen as empowered and held up as much as women who, go on the internet and oil up their bodies and like roll around and take pictures and everybody's like, see, that's a strong, empowered woman right there. A woman who shows her nipples and says she wants a big dick in her pussy. Like, that's an empowered woman. You other women who are just making it about your talents and stuff, you're not empowered. You're probably just insecure and frigid. I don't like it. Again, you can do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care what you do. I'm saying that this is how I perceive the impact of what you do, and that I wish I lived in a world where less of us made our bodies the focal point. So that would be the only kind of gripe I would even have with the hot tub shit. So I get why some people would have taken issue with it, but I also get, again, why there are people who don't take issue with it because they are more in this mindset of today where their opinion is a non-opinion. And I'll talk maybe one day about what I mean when I say non-opinion, but the non-opinion that, hey, as long as you're not hurting anybody, do what you want. For people who feel that way, I get why this doesn't mean anything. This is just a bunch of people bitching about something for no reason. I understand their perspective too, and they have a right to that perspective. And I'm not saying that in a condescending way where I'm like, hey, you have the right to be wrong. No, I genuinely mean that that is a valid opinion to have. and it's a valid stance to take. Which is why the update on this issue has actually now kind of annoyed me. And it's the number of people who, when the hot tub thing first started, were all like, you're uptight assholes for not liking the fact that these women are handling their business, getting that dough, doing what they gotta do with their bodies. It's fine. It's not gonna drag down the platform. It's not doing anything to anything. They're not bringing over a negative, toxic audience that's gonna then go over to other female streamers and then expect you to show your bodies or value you less because you're not. So many of those same people are now changing their tunes because a new thing people are talking about now is, again, like female streamers that are now using ASMR, but in ways that the people complaining consider to be like very sexual, but in ways that, again, are just kind of seeing how far they can push the guidelines, how far they can push the terms of service. A lot of people who were totally on board with the, bikini, hot tub, like whatever thing are now like mad about this. And now they're like, well, whatever. Like before, it was just women in bikinis and there's nothing wrong with that. You can see a woman in bikini anywhere. You just be like on a beach or something. That's fine. But this, now I'm kind of on the other side where I'm like, actually, the intent in either case was to tantalize. And to me, the intent matters. Like, so whether you're tantalizing people by just showing your body and your skin, because you know that all you need to do is show your body and your skin. That's really all it is. Like, you could just be wearing a little crop top and have underboob poked out, and that's enough for you to get more attention than you might otherwise. Whether you're doing that or, you're going like, or something into a fucking mic, to me, it's the same shit. You are using your sexuality, you are using your body to draw attention on a platform that arguably was not for that. And if you're a person who was totally okay with the bikini hot tub stuff, I just find it strange to now be like so anti and so angry about the ASMR stuff. Not saying that there isn't a difference in degrees, there is. Just being there in a bathing suit is not inherently suggestive or sexually provocative in terms of assuming one's intent. Like, if I go to the pool, you can't assume that my intent in putting on a bathing suit and getting in the pool is to tantalize someone. You can, however, make that assumption with a streamer who has made the effort to build themselves a little fucking pool inside their house so they can put on a scant little bikini, get down in the water, and then read a poem to you. Like, you can make that assumption with them. But the fact that this is the way that somebody can use their bodies and use a bikini, you're right. It does not mean that that is the only use for a bikini, or that a woman in bikini is inherently adult. So I do get coming to this new situation and saying this, however, is kind of inherently sexual. The question is it inherently sexual? I get that there's a lot of stuff that is simulating sexual things. But, somebody could still make the same argument. They're just moving around and making noises. And again, even if you do accept that it is intended to be sexual, that it's intended to arouse, why are you not having that same opinion that you had before where it's like, good, if a woman wants to sexualize herself, if she wants to use her body and use what she's got, like, you do you, boo, like, good. Why is that no longer the opinion for some of these people? Like, why is it all of a sudden like, oh, that's just too much and it's just gross and you just need to get rid of that. Twitch, you gotta do something about it now. This is the issue with trying to compartmentalize things. With thinking that, you can say that one thing is okay, but another thing is not, if those things are rooted in the same place. So I feel like by Twitch being like, all right, let's make another category, because I think that's what they did with the hot tub thing. They were like, we'll just make it a separate category. But if you don't draw like a hard line in the sand, people are gonna roll over it. They're gonna roll over that line and they're just gonna find different ways to skirt the system. Then it's just gonna be something else. The women who are doing it, they don't really have an incentive to not do it. So this can't be about the women who are doing it. Clearly, they don't give a shit. They're going to do what they want. It has to be about the platform and what the platform wants going forward, even if they're afraid to. People are very vocal these days, or I should say, people have always been very vocal, but thanks to social media, you see it more. So a lot of companies are, shitting bricks, and they're very scared to kind of do anything, to enforce their rules, because there will always be the risk that somebody out there is going to say, how dare you do this? and it's going to be all this backlash to their reputation, and they're going to be like, oh no, we don't want anybody to hate our platform and blah blah. So then they're going to turn around and say, we're so sorry, we made a mistake, we made the wrong move, and we'll never do it again. I understand why, if that happens enough, platforms may start to say, you know what, fuck it, we're just not going to address anything. Again, the Serenity quote. These platforms need to have the courage to change the things they can. And they most definitely can change what is or is not allowed on their platform, or what is or is not allowed to be monetized. You can't live in constant fear of upsetting people, you know? And that's easy to say as a person, easier said than done as a company. So I can see why it's more tempting to just kind of tiptoe around an issue, trying to offend the least number of people that you can. Because one thing we've learned, or at least people my age have learned over the years, is that no matter how big you are, you can fall and be usurped by something else, by, you know, the latest and greatest and new thing, especially now when there's always that. Anyway, I guess if there was anything I wanted anyone to take from what the damn point was of me talking about all this, I guess I could do sort of a bulleted list. Let's see. Number 1 is that I think women's bodies will pretty much always be sexualized in a way and valued in a way that is different from and more problematic than men. Another point would be moving the concept of female empowerment away from the female form. Another point would be me understanding that while the implications of the power dynamics are different between when men use women's bodies for profit and when men reduce women to their bodies versus when women use their own bodies for profit or reduce themselves and other women, I still don't like it. Another point being that, you know, somebody isn't a woman hater for feeling some kind of way about women being able to just sort of flash their titties or something and get the kind of exposure or fame or money or whatever that, you know, it may have taken them a lot of hard work to get, while also understanding people who are like, who fucking cares? Let them do what they want. I don't know. There are a lot of points you could take away from this, but a point that you cannot and should not take away from this is that I think there's something inherently wrong with a woman showing her body. Because I feel like that's something somebody's gonna say, that I'm a woman who thinks like women's bodies are bad, and that if you like to show your body, you're being bad. If anything, it's the opposite, that I just don't buy into this bullshit that if you do show your body, you're better. Okay, the moral of this story is society is full of a lot of people with lots of different opinions, and while I may not think all of them are good, that doesn't mean I think all of them are bad. And, you know, feel free to leave your thoughts or not. It's always up to you here in Frostland. I'm not a slave driver or a baby driver or a pile driver. I'm a screwdriver here to twist my threaded thoughts into the wood grain of your ears. And with that, I'm gonna go.